A Jordan Series Drogue is one of several tools that can be used in storm tactics to manage the forward motion of a boat. The problem is that when you've got huge following seas with waves, the boat can accelerate down the wave and hit the backside of the wave in front of it and literally pitch pole, or it can be broached when it loses control, goes abeam to the wave, and then gets tipped sideways. So it's important to be able to put a brake, in essence, on the boat by attaching it to an anchor or drogue or some series of devices that can slow it down. My Jordan Drogue consists of a 60-foot leader, 200 feet of cones that are equivalent to around 150 cones, with a chain on the bottom keeping the drogue in the water, preventing it from slipping out in the back of wave faces. The problem is, where it's attached to the boat can have several thousand pounds of force. In fact, it is estimated with about 150 to 205 inch cones, one can have about 15,000 or 10,000 pounds of force on the bridle. That force, of course, is distributed in a catamaran across two lines, but nevertheless it will probably overwhelm the options that we have to secure it. Now, in an Antares 44, which is what this video will discuss in terms of options, we've got two cleats aft and two cleats midships. The cleanest solution would be to attach the bridle to the aft cleats, and that would minimize chafe. The line of force would be perpendicular to the bolts, and that's precisely how these things are designed. However, the plate behind this particular cleat is small enough so that I believe that it could possibly be ripped out. So the challenge is, how can one use the available hardware, the two cleats aft, one inboard, one close to the tow rail, and then as well exterior on the deck, the two midships, so that you can distribute the weight across all the hardware that you have. My solution is to have one continuous line that is configured in a way that the weight is distributed. So we have all four cleats now that are engaged and used to distribute the weight in this one continuous line, which comes across as three loops. So if you can imagine, this here is the bridle under a lot of tension. You have the one side of the loop that is attached to the first rear cleat. It then loops around here, and you can imagine all these lines, by the way, instead of being ropes through another loop, which will no doubt saw right through, especially without chafe protection. Ideally, all of these loops each one would be individually attached to a block, which then would be attached to the bowline. But I don't have that right now, so this is for illustration purposes. So you have one line that goes from that aft cleat through the eye of the bridle to cleat number one aft, and you can imagine, instead of it being looped around, here is a block. Then it goes back to the bridle, follows the boat to cleat number two, and here's the illustration of how a block can distribute that load much more effectively, which then goes back aft to the bridle and then loops around to terminate or originate, based on your perspective, to this furthest mid-cleat. So that is the setup that I would envision. The areas of concern are the angle of the bridle. I think that in actual fact it would be, because of its length, possibly more at this angle, in which case the rubbing against the cockpit would have to be addressed, but is minimized. The second point of chafe that would have to be addressed is here. The sawing along here, or the swaying along this particular step, So of course I would use protection either by having hoses along the section or some way to protect against chafe here. As well, there would be chafe protection here. If there's a long enough block, it's basically hanging, and therefore you don't have to worry about chafe here. So this is a very crude mock-up, if you will, of how it would look like, and I invite your feedback. Thank you.